Good afternoon to everyone. This afternoon we are going to have a final moment of discussion. It's actually a sort of double moment of discussion because we have together a roundtable that closes the Care Economics workshop that has been organized by the PhD student in economics of the Institute, the PhD student of the Institute in Economics, together with YSI, so Young Scholar Initiative. It's a two-day workshop that has just been, let's say, closed, and this is the final moment. And we also take the occasion to, let's say, have a joint collaboration together with the Institute of Beer Policy. And since this year, we've been doing a series of seminars in gender and labor studies. We thought that this so-called double moment might be an opportunity to have interaction in terms of different types of perspective. So actually, IPEC comes from the Care Economics workshop, and from the other side, I have a lot of activists and feminists that tell us a different perspective. Also, IPEC is a feminist, so it would be like a possibility to have a dialogue in terms of different type of perspective and level of action. So let me a little bit let's say, review the content of this roundtable after the first, let's say, beginning of, let's say, this introductory comment, and to give you the sense and the structure of this roundtable. So the theme of the roundtable is policy and politics of a gender discourse, and the scope, let's say, is to have a final moment of discussion of a cycle of interdisciplinary seminars, as we said, in gender and labor studies, that together with political philosophers and economists, as we have put in place during the last 6 months. The aim of the table is to integrate both policies and politics, okay? That's very nice. Let's see. That have been put in place, or alternatively, that are envisaged in order to construct a gendered discourse. And this notion of gendered discourse is clearly not easy to think or to decline. But our idea was to have, let's say, the possibility to put together, from the one side, let's say, a level of intersectionality of rights. So we want to put together a discourse about social rights, economic rights, reproductive rights, and practices. So way to put in place, let's say, path and, let's say, to structure, if you want, possibility to create alternatives. So it's somehow dual, the scope of this roundtable. And the idea is exactly the one to have, let's say, a composed, let's say, a mixed composition of panelists. We have both economists involved in policy advocacy, and we have Federica, Eleonora, and Francesca that are activists. All of them, they act at different levels, supranational, national, and local context. And I think there will be the possibility to, let's say, having a sort of, if you want, descending way to approach all questions. So we have the structure of the roundtable is the following. We have 2 hours, more or less, of discussion. Each of you has 15 minutes. I will first introduce each of you with a very, very brief bio. And then we will start, let's say, the session by means of, you'll see we have some interactive context that comes from video. So let me, first of all, let's say, present the speakers. I have Francesca Lizzi, which is an activist from Obiezione Respinta, which is an intersectional project that tries to map the forms of let's say, opposition to the possibility of abortion rights. And she is a researcher in technologies at the Institute of Nuclear Physics Institute. So it's the National Institute of Physics. Am I right? Yes. And she works on artificial intelligence application to medicine. Am I right? That's correct. Great. Then I have, so I'm just translating right now, so I'm not very good, I'm not a good artificial intelligence. Okay. Then I have Eleonora Mizzoni, and she's part of the help desk of a very interesting organization, Women on Web, which is a non-government organization, which since 20 years support the possibility to get pharmacological abortion in by means of telemedicine. And it's an international type of organization. So you see the different level of action. Then we have Federica Loy. She's an activist, a feminist and trans-feminist activist. And she works in a very nice place that I hope you have the chance to see and visit. It's called the Luce y Siesta. I mean, you forgive me if the pronunciation is not correct. We will have the time to present the center, and it's actually, let's say, a center where practices of support for women and in general for vulnerable subjects that have been exposed to violent type of action are put in place. So these are forms of centers that create part to regenerate, let's say, people that have been, let's say, under the threat of violence. It's not only this, I think it's much broader than that, but I think she has the time to better discuss, so just very, very big. Then we have IPEC, that you already know, but I will present IPEC again. IPEC is professor of economics at Istanbul Technical University, Faculty of Management and Associate Director of ITU Women's Studies Center. Researchers include the macroeconomics of unemployment and wages, labor market inequality, work-life balance policies, time use, the care economy, and sustainable growth. And she acts as a country expert on Turkey in the European Network of Experts in Gender Equality, reporting to the European Commission on a quarterly basis. So she's really our, let's say, perspective on policy advice, I think. And serves on a 5-member advisory board for the UNDP, Human Development Report on Turkey, on inclusive growth. So you see that the panelists are quite diverse in terms of their action, in terms of their perspective, and in terms of the content of the discussion. So before starting our discussion, which will be actually closed by me and particularly by Professor Anna Loretoni, which is the head of the Faculty of Social Science here. She's the dean of the Faculty of Social Science here at the school, and she will provide let's say, closing remarks that collects, let's say, both, let's say, the content that comes from the table, but also in general on the seminar series, and she will join the table afterwards. So having said that, you know the structure, you know yourself. I hope that you have the chance to discuss. And I would like to start this final moment of discussion by means of a video that I kindly ask Mark to send. Marco, il primo video. Okay, sorry. In the meantime, I think maybe. Yes. Okay, we are good, yeah? There is always the oh moment, but it's fine.
When capitalism separated the spheres of production and reproduction of life, the links between them were hidden. Housework and care work are not out of the processes that create life's social and economic conditions. On the contrary, it's this invisible work, generally done by women, Black and immigrant people, that sustains the economy. We are all vulnerable and interdependent. It is care work that provides a clean and healthy environment that enables all other activities. To value this work means recognizing that everyone needs care throughout their lives, regardless of age, and their health conditions. Care is a fundamental human need. To transform our current economic model, we need to practice solidarity and reciprocity in our lives, our social movements, and our daily political efforts. Care work that currently sits primarily on the shoulders of women must be shared with all people and under the responsibility of the state. We know that all this work requires time, of which we feel we have so little. To reorganize the economy, we must overhaul our time and our work. For that, we need to rethink all the model. How much time would we save if housework and caregiving were shared? And how much time would we have free if we work to sustain life in our societies and not to guarantee the profits of big businessmen? Why do we consume what we consume? How do we consume? And how could we consume? How do we produce? And how could we produce? For what? For whom? Eco-dependence. The current capitalist economic model has created a false separation between nature and culture, as if nature were an endless source of resources, as if we weren't nature too. Feminist economy reminds us that biodiversity is the fruit of the relationship with traditional peoples and their ways of life. We are all in co-evolution. We must respect nature's regeneration cycle and rethink our relationship with food, valuing local agricultural and culinary practices, and ensuring that communities have the means to grow food in their own territories. Feminist economy is not a ready-made formula. It has no recipe. It is a proposal to transform the logic around which today's society is organized, built on the principles pointed out in these videos. 1. Recognize and reorganize housework and care work. 2. Placing sustainability of life at the center. 3. Interdependence. 4. Eco-dependence. And there's only one way to get there: struggling, building people power. Which is why we are part of organized movements in every territory throughout the world, carrying out political action daily. Without collective struggle, there is no feminism, no environmental justice. Without struggle, there is no life.
Okay, so this video that is actually done, realized, produced by the Sempre Viva Organização Feminista di Sao Paulo, is another organization. It's an international organization that works a lot in the South America and America Latina in particular, in order to promote and advance in terms of, let's say, gender discourse. We thought that might have been a way to, let's say, set the stage without any additional, let's say, consideration. Having said that, I think that the video rightly points to some aspects that are very much important for a correct, let's say, understanding of, or at least for a problematization of what does it mean a caring economy, what does it mean a caring society, and who should take the burden for their activity. So the notion of, I think, interdependence and eco-dependence are some of the aspects that would be for sure put under, let's say, attention. But the other aspect that I would like also to discuss would be the idea of there is no recipe, right? So there are a lot of practices and there are a lot of, let's say, paths and direction that might try, it should be go into, I will say, a pool of objectives. So let's see what are the alternative, yes, let's see what are these alternative paths and practices. So we will start with IPEC. And more or less, it should focus on economic and social divides faced by women, policy level advocacy, but these are just, let's say, framework words. So please take your time and go ahead.
Thank you, Marika, for this opening, and also thank you for introducing us to this film. I like it very much. I've been doing training programs on gender and economics and on the care economy with development practitioners, with policymakers in different countries and regions. And I think I will integrate it as one of the training materials. It sort of makes a good starting point for discussion and exploring some important concepts. So I would like to pick up on one statement from the end of the film, and that was that feminist economy is not a ready-made formula. It has no recipe. In some ways that is true, but also I would like to challenge that statement a little bit on the basis of what we've been discussing in this room also since yesterday. So given decades of feminist advocacy around the feminist economy, I think we can say we have some of the important elements of a recipe. We do have some concrete policy proposals. We just need to push on with relentless determination. That's still what is needed. So the purple economy framework that I shared yesterday, in fact, builds upon this accumulated feminist knowledge and experience and proposals. So just to reiterate and add some new elements, as you will maybe remember, for those of you who were there yesterday, access to quality and affordable care services. And just to abstract from the whole discussion around commodification and so on, let me say access to quality and affordable care services driven by public provisioning with a perspective of a social infrastructure is one of the primary entry points of this recipe. And it aims to redistribute the responsibility for care between the private sphere of the household and the public sphere, with an emphasis on co-responsibility of the state in this matter. And also to also address the concerns raised about, whether these jobs are decent jobs and so on, let me also emphasize that this entry, this intervention needs to treat care services with a sectoral approach as a sector to be supported, to be expanded, but not only that, also to be upgraded through sectoral policies in coordination with higher education systems and occupational training programs. The second element of our recipe for a feminist economy is one that we talked a little bit less about, but we touched upon it in the past 2 days. Labor market regulations, expanding the space for unpaid care, expanding the space for work-life reconciliation, which has the objective of redistributing this time the responsibility for care within the private sphere of the household from women to men on an unpaid basis, with an emphasis on co-responsibility of men, co-responsibility of different genders, however we want to put it, and co-responsibility of the employers. So what kinds of policies are we talking about? I think with respect to services, we discussed it a lot, but with labor market regulations, with these objectives, we are talking about comprehensive care leave policies, care insurance schemes, paternity leave of equal length and conditions as maternity leave, shorter working weeks in the labor market that make the space for not only for unpaid care of dependents, of our dependents in the household, and not only makes that space for unpaid care for women, because most of those labor market regulations have this exclusive focus on women reconciling, but putting the focus on men also being incentivized to reconcile, and also the shorter working week providing the space for self-care. Gender equality measures in hiring, wages, and decision-making to support all these work-life balance interventions. something that we talked about a little bit, starting with the presentation of Lorenzo and Armanda, formalization and improving the employment conditions of care workers. And we know that the combination of access to quality and affordable care services, along with these kinds of labor market interventions, do make a difference. We have the Scandinavian experience. Although women do slightly a bit more unpaid care work than men, even in the Scandinavian countries where such a framework exists, we know that over time, that the gender gap in unpaid work and in care work, paid and unpaid care work, also the occupational segregation, has decreased substantially. It is one of the lowest globally. And so we know that this combination of policies works. And we also have an emerging, what I call the Dutch model on, for instance, childcare, though far from perfect, but it gives us an inspiration for what kind of model we're talking about. Flexible care leave with flexible employment, where both parents divide the working week between care leave days and employment days at the workplace, also supported in some segments of the week by access to public childcare services. So this combination model does not only support caregivers and prevent caregiving from being a source of vulnerability for them, but it also supports the perspective of the care receiver, the child. The child has access to building a relationship with both parents without exhausting them. So quality or receiving quality care from parents, from both parents, plus benefits of a stimulating socialization process in the play groups, in the public care services centers. This socialization process in a group setting that helps the child to develop social skills and develop autonomy from an early age onwards. So from a care receiver perspective, it also aligns the coordination of care leave policy with care services policy. The third area of intervention, the third element of this recipe, because the first two need a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of financing, is care-aware, gender-aware macroeconomic framework. And we already have 3 decades of work on feminist macroeconomics, led by some great feminist macroeconomists. What they call for and what they explore, the different ways in which we can expand the fiscal space for care expenditures, using monetary policy also to support the expansion of this fiscal space, adopting a full employment and decent jobs creation target as a primary macroeconomic target, going beyond GDP growth, building upon the synergies, as I mentioned yesterday, between the heterodox macroeconomics proposals, green macroeconomic proposals, and feminist macroeconomic proposals, because as of the 2020s, we are really at that point where all these 3 lines of policy advocacy are coming together and emerging towards overlapping policy proposals, and also using the current context of sustained economic crises with increasing unemployment, increasing joblessness, even in good times, a phenomenon of jobless growth under technological structural change, the ecological crisis, plus the recent experience of the pandemic. So this context also gives us a very good starting point on which to advocate and ally with heterodox macroeconomists, green macroeconomists, and have the feminist macroeconomy built into a comprehensive framework. And this framework, therefore, basically argues that allocating resources to care do not only serve the objective of gender equality, and I don't mean to undermine that the objective of gender equality is a very, very important one on its own, but it also has the multiplier effects. Investing in care beyond gender equality has the multiplier effects on decreasing unemployment, decreasing joblessness, alleviating poverty, promoting sustainable growth through service-driven job creation, and building resilience against pandemics and disasters. And indeed, this strategy of advocacy seems to be paying off with incredible attention to the care economy in policy circles, at least on the intergovernmental platforms. And the United Nations Secretary General report, our common agenda, which again I mentioned yesterday, which calls on all UN member nations to invest in 3 sectors for inclusive and sustainable growth. Let's remember what they were: the green sectors, the care sectors, and the digital sectors. And inspired by this film and also some feminist discussions, I think agriculture, sustainable agriculture, definitely needs to come in there as a 4th sector. What we didn't talk about is how we also need, as a 4th intervention, an overarching governance structure which aligns the interventions in these 3 areas: expansion of care services, labor market regulations, care-aware, gender-aware macroeconomic policies. So these are all the responsibilities of different governance bodies: the Ministry of Finance, Ministry for Labor, Ministry for Social Care Services, Ministry for Equality. So what we need, in fact, is an overarching governance structure which coordinates and aligns these interventions. And we do have some interesting examples. One is from Uruguay, what they call the National Integrated Care System of Uruguay, which was established following a presidential order in 2010 under the National Council on Social Policy, and it is managed by what they call the National Care Board of Uruguay. It consists of ministries of labor and social security, education, economy and finance, social development and culture, as well as Office for Planning and Budgeting, and National Administration for Public Education, and the National Women's Institute. And the board regularly consults with an advisory care committee, of which the key partners are women's NGOs, children's NGOs, human rights NGOs, academia, unions, and the private sector. So I would like to move on to a second point, having laid out the sort of some of the important elements of this recipe, as to, while we do have these elements, what do we have when we look at the policy discourse? What do we have on our hands so far? So there are 2 dominant paradigms, and they were both talked about in this room through the various presentations at the 2 extremes. On the one hand, we have a neoliberal economic paradigm, which is based on assumes the supremacy of competitive markets, profits, and growth. Anything that remains outside of markets, profits, and growth is undermined. It's not important, it's marginal. So provisioning by caring labor and provisioning by nature, therefore, is marginalized in this paradigm. Care work is deemed unproductive type of work, unimportant, and dispensable. So what choice is left in this paradigm? 2 choices. Women either continue to uphold caring norms, exhibit altruistic behavior, and pay the price for doing that, which is basically sustaining gender and intersectional inequalities. Or women, like most men, opt out of care, adopt market-first behavior, profits and self-interest first behavior, generally associated with men, statistically. And we then, as both women and men adopt this kind of behavior as imposed by the neoliberal paradigm, we move towards an increasingly non-caring economy, non-caring society. And mind you, the neoliberal paradigm is based on the assumption of rational, utility maximizing, self-interested economic man, the individual. And it doesn't really have any problems with gender equality in theory. On the contrary, it supports gender equality from this very liberal, individualistic way of thinking. And to the extent that this paradigm allows for interventions for gender equality in the economic sphere, these interventions focus exclusively on promoting, for instance, women's entrepreneurship, access to microcredit, social, not economic, but social promotion of women's roles in decision-making, equal opportunities in education, but alas, without making the space for care. So if these are to succeed, these gender equality interventions, once again, it would require women to opt out of care and adopt market-first behavior. So standing on the other opposite is the other paradigm, a conservative right backlash, described actually very much along the lines of the fascist era that was described in the morning panel. Unlike the neoliberal paradigm, the conservative right backlash does not support gender equality, even in theory, even on paper. On the contrary, it promotes conventional gender roles and a gendered division of labor. But interestingly, in doing so, this conservative paradigm celebrates care. It celebrates care through a celebration of motherhood and women's altruistic caregiving roles, arguing that ultimately this is biologically determined. So what kinds of policy options do we have there? Cash for care, social transfers to mothers and caregivers to elderly or disabled, pensions for homemakers, at best, part-time home-based employment options that enable women, not men, but women to reconcile paid and unpaid work, and in some contexts, expanded maternity leave. This conservative backlash points out to how our societies are becoming increasingly uncaring. This is one of their major entry points, how we need to return to family values, how we need the family and the community to preserve the space for solidarity, yet the responsibility for preserving that space is deemed as a biologically determined responsibility of the female sex. So instead of accusing the contracting space for care and solidarity on unbridled neoliberalism and underlying under its mask, disguise, the patriarchy, they accuse feminism and the struggle for women's autonomy. So they put us into this trap of dichotomizing family values, solidarity, community as diametrically opposed to gender equality, as if the autonomy that we are seeking is an autonomy from solidarity, from provisioning of care. Maybe it is the case for if there's something called neoliberal feminism, but definitely not core feminism as we know it. Okay, so last 2 points, and I will do them shortly. So what are women's reactions to these two political paradigms? There is some very interesting emerging research which shows that it depends, what women's reactions are, depends in part on their starting position with respect to whether they are a labor market worker versus an unpaid care worker, a full-time homemaker. So interestingly, analysis of voting behavior in quite a few national contexts show that women have a higher preference for conservative candidates and conservative parties. This is named in the literature, in the political science literature, as the traditional gender political gap. But research also shows that in a number of advanced industrial economies, the traditional gender gap in politics has started transforming towards what now the literature names the modern gender political gap, where women seem to be, on the contrary, having a higher likelihood of voting for progressive candidates and parties. Interestingly, a closer look at electoral poll data in a variety of national contexts, and we have done this for Spain and Turkey recently, demonstrate overwhelming support of particularly female homemakers for conservative parties and candidates and the type of cash transfer policies, the celebration of motherhood, the celebration of homemaking roles, and so on. And once you control for labor market status, the coefficient, with the dependent variable being voting conservative, the coefficient on women turns negative. So it is not women as a homogeneous group that have a higher probability of voting conservative than men, but it is the female full-time homemakers who do so. What does that mean in terms of an economic strategy and interactions with the macroeconomy? Our recent work on Spain and Turkey with combining micro data from survey polls, electoral polls with macro data on lagged regional female employment rates, shows that women's increasing integration into employment, that is the narrowing of the gender economic gap, drives along with it a narrowing of the gender political gap, where we start losing any gender differences in reaction to conservative versus progressive politics. So where does this leave us between the neoliberal and the conservative right backlash? The third way out, a feminist economy, as in this film, which celebrates care, which does not call for a reduction of care. On the contrary, it calls for demands for expansion of the space for more and better care, but not at the expense of gender inequalities, building on two guiding principles: equality in caregiving through co-responsibility of the state and citizens, co-responsibility of men and women, and equality from the care receiver's perspective in care receiving through a universal right to access quality care.
Thank you so much, Deepak. Thank you. As part of the discussion, in order to have, let's say, a smooth, let's say, movement also of the discussion, I will ask Marco to send the second video, and then we try to see what we are missing and what is in the table, because I mean there's a big discussion. Yes, please.
Capire moça, mamam, capire, ela moça. O que é ser mulher? O que cada uma de nós já deixamos de fazer ou fizemos com algum nível de dificuldade pela identidade de gênero, pelo fato de ser mulher? Eu fico muito feliz e muito à vontade porque essa tribuna, esse lugar legítimo, onde a gente não ocupa só no 8 de março, né? Onde a gente pode falar das reformas, contra as reformas da Previdência, onde a gente pode falar sobre a nossa posição em oposição ao governo Marcelo Crivella, quando a gente pode falar do processo da intervenção federal, na luta por demarcação das mulheres indígenas, da luta das minhas irmãs, mulheres negras que vieram antes de nós, que resistiram tamanha absurdo que foi o período da escravidão, a luta por toda forma, pelo fim de toda forma de opressão que se reflete no racismo, na misoginia, na luta contra o patriarcado. Inclusive nesse momento onde a democracia se coloca frágil, onde se questiona se vai ter processo eleitoral ou não, aonde a gente vê todos os escândalos com relação ao parlamento, falar das mulheres que lutam pela outra forma de fazer política no processo democrático é fundamental. As mulheres, quando saem às ruas na manifestação do 8 de março, daqui a pouco na Candelária, fazem porque entre 83 países o Brasil é o 7º mais violento. E aí, volta a repetir, dados da Organização Mundial de Saúde. Esse quadro segue piorando, aumentando 6,5 no último ano. Por dia, são 12 mulheres assassinadas no Brasil. O último dado que a gente tem no estado do Rio de Janeiro figuram de 13 estupros por dia. Essa é a relação com a violência contra as mulheres. A gente tem um senhor que está defendendo a ditadura e falando alguma coisa contrária a isso. Eu peço que a presidência da casa, no caso de maiores manifestações que venham atrapalhar a minha fala, assim proceda como a gente faz quando a tribuna interrompe qualquer vereador. Não serei interrompida, não aturo o interrompimento dos vereadores desta casa, não aturarei de um cidadão que vem aqui e não sabe ouvir a posição de uma mulher eleita, presidente da Comissão da Mulher dessa casa.
Okay, so I think we can proceed. So why we decide to, let's say, share this video? As you know, Mariel Franco was a Brazilian politician, sociologist, feminist, socialist, and human rights activist. And as you see, the space of democracy are not even, let's say, ensured inside institutional settings. So I think it's really a good starting point for the second part of the discussion. And I mean, as you know, Mariela's been a subject of a murder. So she was one of the last speech she did. And I think it's really, let's say, a person that can try to connect, I mean, the history of this person, the type of approach, the way in which she develops politics and policies to connect both sides, because she was actually working in institution, but she was really coming from an activist perspective. She was born in favelas and she was trying to put forward the rights, gender rights, and conducting a lot of struggles in order to increase space of democracy. So I think now you have all, let's say, the piece to, let's say, interact. So I let Federica Aloy from Luce Siesta present themselves and to go.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Federica. I'm an activist of the Women House Luce Siesta, and now I try to tell you more or less the huge work that Lucia is doing in Rome. The Women's House Luce Siesta is a space of feminist and transfeminist relationship where intersectional gender and commoning policies are elaborated, experimented, and practiced. Since 2008, it has hosted an anti-violence center, a shelter for women seeking to escape in violence. Currently, it hosted 3 single women and 3 families. Then there is also a cultural hub and a space for collective engagement and growth. Since it was created, Luce Siesta has become a reference point in the fight against the gender-based violence. The community was formed with a precise goal in mind, reclaiming a building that has been abandoned for decades. The women who crossed its gate that day come from the housing movement, feminism, and the fight against violence, recognize that the autonomy of women and their choices was compromised at the intersection of these issues. When the time came to leave their house, in fact, to escape violent situation, the alternative were terribly insufficient. The space of Luce Siesta, in fact, was born out of necessity, the need for a home, that the home represents a fundamental need for liberation from the oppression of the gender-based violence, which in all its manifestation nourishes our capitalist, racist, and heteropatriarchal culture. It's about reclaiming a space where we can envision liberation, and where we can engage in feminist care practices. Since the first day, Luce Siesta has been constantly evolving and changing the experience, traversed by ongoing tensions that push us to confront and recognize and reconsider our approach in light of relationships increasingly focused on care and recognition of the others. Lucia, as a transfeminist commoning process, defines its community around constantly evolving practices and knowledge. Our methodology, developed over the past 15 years, is not rigid or crystallized, but continuously evolving and transforming based on influences, needs, and desires. Through the concept of white space, we approach each phase and journey with a mode of thinking that is never rigid, but oriented towards experimentation, guided by creativity and invention. We use this approach in the practice of the Anti-Violence Center, as well as our assembly space and care meetings. These moments are often challenging and demanding. There are no right answers, but the possibility to create alternative paths. It is in political assemblies and care meetings where conflict and consensus find space. We know that consensus is a difficult practice, far from simplification. It is a process where shared decisions are constructed through listening and dialogue, seeking agreement in disagreement, requiring a passage through the uncertainty and conflict. The self-governance declaration we wrote as a part of an ongoing negotiation with the regional authorities that has not been concluded is situated in our present, while simultaneously deriving meaning from our broader horizon open to different times and places, always oriented toward transforming the existing. We recognize a mosaic community that comprises Lucia, consisting of different groups and multiple entities that contribute to the care work in Luce Siesta. The garden group, the tailoring workshop, events and culture, and the group of anti-violence workers. We do not invisibilize any work, but value each piece that makes up the larger community. Luce Siesta is a political space that brings about culture and structural change in face of the inertia of neoliberal institutions that have yet to regularize its status, despite the immense depth of care it holds. However, even today, Luce Siesta is under attack. It is facing approaches in which the president of the association has been accused of occupying the property where hundreds of women have found a home, unemployment, and a safe place of recovery. This process is taking place despite the fact that the property was purchased by Lazio region, but justice proceeds by exerting its institutional violence, placing on one single person the responsibility for the action of dozens of activists and hundreds of people who have worked voluntarily for years in support of the women who have found a house there. So, after being deprived of meaning and inserted to the capitalist logic of value depreciation, the goal is to reclaim and reappropriate the space of anti-violence centers through practice of feminist and transfeminist care, through, for example, external practices, experiential laboratories, moments of fun and culture. In Luce Siesta, we follow path of elaboration, and also the work is not only aimed at harm reduction, but is also political work of prevention. We recognize that the work in the anti-violence center is not enough to counter the patriarchal violence, but territorial and pervasive work of awareness and prevention is necessary in all areas of life. Schools, universities, workplaces, commercial activities, and leisure of leisure. Taking care is undervalued, invisible, underpaid work and unpaid work, mostly performed by women and racialized individuals. And at the same time, it is a relationship that supports bodies and space. So what collective care practice can create alternatives to gender-based violence, racism, and environmental injustice. Those who support path of exit and empowerment are underpaid workers in a system of grants that oppresses and tries to confine us within the rigid framework of standardized path with fewer and fewer resources. And the competitive logic of grants, price reduction, minimal funding, and perpetual precarity are indeed an expression of patriarchal violence enacted by institution in a culture that now sees profit as the sole measure of one's work. It is from this position, aware of all the time and expertise we invested, that we wonder how to redefine the constant work of care, reclaiming it taught the construction of a feminist and trans-feminist methodology, weaving horizontal relationships and doing and thinking together. In contrast to an economy that exploits and neutralize care work, we try to oppose an alternative system that politicizes work, placing the values of each individual at the center. Therefore, in a downward logic in which the system operates, constantly depriving us of resources, we counterpose the need to equip ourselves with tools aimed at care and collective rethinking. Tools such as team meetings, supervision, white space for thinking, experimenting with the possible solution, and leaving room for creativity, maneuvering through the obstacle posed by a patriarchal society, always guided by the desire for change. So I'm going to conclude. Against the capitalist and neoliberal culture, we oppose the paradigm of care as a way to transcend the dynamic that produces suffering with the aim to building better future by perpetuating a model of reproductive care. And we would like to build alliance and kinship that strengthen us and recognize us in the present of our struggle for the liberation of our nature. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Federica, for the testimony of these credible collective care practices that we are doing, and thank you so much. I think we can now move to Eleonora Mizzoni, Women on Web. Se vuoi presentare,
Thank you. I will talk a bit about Women on Web. After this speech of Lucia Siesta, I'm emotional because Lucia Siesta is... yeah, it's Lucia Siesta. Yeah. Women on Web is an international team of help desk workers, activists, researchers, doctors, and digital rights and advocates. We offer safe and affordable online abortion care centered around the rights, privacy, and preferences of women and trans and non-binary people who seek for an abortion. We are driven by social and digital innovation that expand abortion access and catalyze policy change. We are passionate about empowering people with actionable, evidence-based abortion information. We set ambitious and long-term goals to improve abortion access and work toward a future where abortion pills are sold in pharmacies without prescriptions. Together with our sister organization, Women on Weights, and local feminist groups and networks, we run fearless and innovative campaigns to raise awareness of the transformative power of the abortion pills. Our better-known campaigns involve sea voyages, drones, or robots to countries where abortion are illegal, But we also conduct research, develop art projects, engage in legal actions, give sexual education and medical knowledge workshop, and help women with in the course of their abortion via the internet. We did ship campaigns in Ireland, in Poland, in Portugal, Spain, Morocco, Guatemala, and Mexico. During our ship campaigns, we pick up pregnant people up to 12 weeks of pregnancy. We take them in international waters, and then we give them abortion pills. On June 2001, Women on Waves set sail from Netherlands to the Republic of Ireland, and in 2001, the Republic of Ireland had one of the most restrictive abortion law in Europe. And Women on Waves was invited by several Irish abortion rights organizations. The aim of this trip was to highlight the hypocrisy of the Irish abortion situation and catalyze the efforts to liberalize the abortion law and to build a coalition to legislative reform. By the time we arrived in Ireland, we had received 80 calls from women requesting abortion services. We did not have early enough mifepristone for all. The fact that the extent of the demand surprised everyone, including our British partners, who assumed that Irish women would easily prefer to travel to Britain. After 5 days, 300 women had contacted the ship. They included women who had been raped, schoolgirls who could not find an easy way to go to England, mothers who could not pay for childcare during their journey to England, and political refugees who did not have the papers to travel and already had an uncertain future. Women on Waves has contributed that time in Ireland to build international and national pro-choice coalition and helped to put the issue of the illegal abortion and women's reproductive rights back to the international agenda. The Irish pro-choice community has been activated and grown tremendously, and they did at the end a referendum on March 2002, and they happily won it. But let's talk about telemedicine. If you need an abortion, you can request it through our online consultation, womenonweb.org. If you are not pregnant, but you want the pills too, you want it for a future use, you can request abortion pills as well by our online consultation. The consultation is reviewed by our medical team. After that, we provide a prescription for the abortion pills, and the medicines are sent by mail to the women, trans, and non-binary person who is requesting it. Our organization was the first international telemedicine abortion service, paving the way for safe, remote abortion care around the world. In the past 17 years, we have been supported more than 100,000 people to have an abortion with pills and responded over 1 million emails from care seekers all around the world. To catalyze service and policy change, Women on Web has also published over 20 research papers about the safety and efficacy of our service and telemedical abortion in general. In countries where abortion is legal, like Italy, our research is fueling action against persistent access barriers. The average requests that are made to us from Italy is growing every year, and we believe that this is a fact that cannot be overlooked. We think that women, trans, and non-binary people should be trusted to make decisions about their own bodies. People can safely and effectively self-manage an abortion with pills when they have access to high-quality medication and information. Abortion is essential healthcare and a fundamental human right. Abortion restrictions are scientifically unsound and harmful, and they disproportionately impact the most marginalized people. Black people, people of color, migrants, young people, poor people, people who is living in remote areas and living in situation of violence, of abuse and conflict. We recognize that each person's abortion is shaped by a wide range of medical and non-medical actors, including feminist collectives, including hotlines, digital platforms, friends, family, and other support networks. We work toward a world where anyone can access abortion with respect and dignity. We envision a future where home abortion are normalized, safe, and supported by clinicians, policymakers, and the general public. And we strongly believe that the world we are trying to imagine together must be built by practice. And our world, the world we are imagining, is free from patriarchy and capitalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleonora, for having, for the presentation that you did about women on web. It's really fascinating the way in which you build, let's say, abortion rights throughout what you call social innovation and digital innovation. So this way of actually trying to enlarge the space of possibility to get abortion rights that, as we see, are actually denied by economic and political conditions. So I think, really, it's really important your presence today here, and in general for the moment that we are facing as society. And I have the last presentation. Francesca, please. And then prepare your questions if you have any. Get ready. Thank you so much. Please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. If it was hard for Eleonora to speak after Luce Siesta, it's hard for me to speak after Women on Web. And I want to underline this thing because I am going to speak about relationships and how important they are for us. So I am Francesca from Obiezione Respinta, that literally means conscientious objection rejected. We chose this name because in Italy, the law that regulates abortion access is the 194 law, allows physicians to not perform an abortion. I want to underline that this law allows only physicians to not perform the abortion. I want to start saying that this law is quite funny because the name of the law is Maternity Law for Maternity Protection. So we started our project in 2017, and our project is an intersectional transfeminist approach. Use an intersectional transfeminist approach. We mainly started to build a map that you can see here in this slide, and we asked people to tag hospitals that not perform abortion. Doing this, people that have to have an abortion can check on our map if there is a structure, an hospital, a family planning near to their living place, and they can go there safely. When we started our project, our main purpose was to obviously try to monitor conscientious objection in Italy, because there is no public list of objectors in Italy. So it may happen that you go to a family planning or to an hospital for an abortion and you can have it. So we use red and green pins. As you can see, there are many, many pins on the map. And when we started, we were thinking only about hospitals and physicians, but during these years, and thanks to the witnesses that people told us, we found many forms of a sort of conscientious objection. For example, there are many pharmacists that do not sell the emergency contraceptive. We found also general practitioners that do not give the contraceptive and so on. So we decided to add all this information on our map. We collect the witnesses of people who have an abortion through our social media, using, as I said before, an intersectional transfeminist approach. This for us means that we start from our point of view, from our privilege, from our situation, in order to query and see the world around us. The project started on our experiences. In 2017, some of us needed the emergency contraceptive, some other abortion, and we found that the situation was very bad in Italy. When we started, we thought that the map would have been made in Pisa without any interest, maybe. We did not really understand the potential at the time of this kind of map, but in few years we collected many witnesses and many stories of people. We use the map for monitoring things. Monitoring means and can mean many things. First, we use the map. This is the last slide. I just wanted you to show the map. We use the map to choose the target we want to, for example, we want to tag for a demonstration and so on. Here in Pisa, for example, during the demonstration of the Non Una di Meno movement of the 8th March in 2017, we decided to write with pink paint in front of the pharmacy who was not selling the emergency contraceptive, our name, obiezione respinta. And 2 years later, we knew that this pharmacist now is selling the emergency contraceptive. The use of the map for monitoring things is not only a simple information collection, okay? It is also a sort of a way to monitor, for example, the history, how conscientious objection is changing, how it's evolving, what are the new form of violences. As we said at the beginning, there is no recipe for a feminist economy or for a feminist, healthcare in some way, but we have some feminist principles that we use to develop our instruments, our practices, and our struggles. For example, the collection of witnesses help in understanding how violence changes. What are the new forms of violence that may hit a person, a woman, a non-binary, or a trans person that have to have access to reproductive care? We decided to use the form of sharing and collecting experiences, witnesses. When someone writes to us, he, she, they can write anything they want. We believe that sharing experiences is a sort of fundamental point for our experience. We believe that in relationships, in the recognition of our pain, of our difficulties in others, things may change. As an example, I just want to report to you an event that happened to us just a few months ago. A girl wrote to us to tell us that a pharmacy in Rome was not selling emergency contraceptive. We shared her story on our social network, and the chief of that pharmacist wrote to us in private to ask for some information, and then he fired the pharmacist who didn't sell the pills to this girl. And in order to just not, the point is not just to fire people or something else. We decided to organize in Rome last Friday an event in the University of Sapienza with this pharmacist in order to inform other pharmacists about this form of conscientious objection that is illegal in Italy. A pharmacist cannot refuse to sell you the day after pill. So we think that the success of our project is based on the fact that we use the sisterhood principle, if we want to call it. So we start from the fact that we believe to people that write to us, but we believe to people that who may undergo to the violence, and we do not believe to people who may perform the violence. Sometimes physicians, pharmacists wrote to us to tell us that they are good, they sell things, but if we do not have the witness of a woman non-binary or trans person that goes to that hospital or to that pharmacist, we do not believe that people. So our project is not just about information collection on a map. We also help women, non-binary and trans people to have an abortion. So people can write to our social network page and can ask for help. Our purpose is not obviously to replace or substitute the national health public system, but we think that our role is to be the j'accuse, to underline the difficulties and that people encounter when they try to have an abortion. We think that our experience is quite different since it is based on this sharing of experiences, sharing of relationship, and we think that this is a very important point of our project. Unfortunately, in the last few years and months, we can say the situation in Italy for the access to healthcare, reproductive care is getting worse. When we started in 2017, we were one of the first to help people to get an abortion, while nowadays almost any non una di meno local assembly are doing the same thing because the request number is improving. As you know, during the election campaign, the party of Meloni focused their attention on abortion, and they said that they did want not to change the law about abortion, and we know why, because this law does not guarantee us the access to abortion. I cited the Non Una di Meno movement because we think that to make this kind of project working, we need a physical network. It's not just a matter of social network or a telematic relationship. Because sometimes people that needs to have an abortion need someone physically there to help them, and also because we need to build trust among us. So our network is made of obviously us, Non Una di Meno, but also another Instagram page that is called IVG abortito sto benissimo. That means abortion, I had an abortion and feel very well, okay? And thanks to this network, we can reach almost any place in Italy. And this is, very important. When somebody needs an abortion, it needs to be timely. It needs to be cheap. If in the region there is no structure that perform abortion, people have to move. Moving is expensive and so on. As said at the beginning, being a trans-feminist intersectional project means to collect knowledge. We collected much information, and the variety of procedures of our health system does not guarantee a recipe for accessing and having an abortion. In particular, I just want to cite the cases where people have not papers, or they come from countries that are outside of Europe. Since there is an health system based on regional laws in Italy, each region has a different way to approach to this problem. So getting an abortion for a person without papers is like more expensive, is like more difficult. We do not have a translator in hospitals, so if a woman does not speak Italian, it is very difficult. And in our experiences, people coming from outside the European Union are usually suggested to do a chirurgical abortion. That is, harder with respect to the pharmacological one. Another word that was said before that triggered me was the adaptation to the context. I just want to tell you a story about abortion during COVID-19 pandemic. In Italy, during the first wave of pandemic, the situation was very bad. The hospitals were closed. Basic services were denied to people. Obviously, abortion was one of them. So in this situation, we decided with our network and with also the pro-choice movement to start a project that was called SOS Abortion. People could write to us to ask for help in having abortion. This kind of network produces a sort of lobbying work that also leads to the changing of the national guidelines on abortion access and on telemedicine in particular. I just want to conclude that we do not use the social network only for collecting information and witnesses, but we try to use them also to change the narration, the discourse that is around abortion. In Italy, the stigma over people that have an abortion is very high and very strong. People hide the fact they had an abortion, and the people are afraid of telling that they had an abortion. Abortion is always a painful moment, is always a bad moment, it's always an hard choice, but sometimes we simply do not want children. So it's not so hard, it's not so bad, it's not so sad. So we try to develop and build a new storytelling about abortion because our goal is the elimination of stigma and also obviously to have a safe, free, timely, happy abortion for obviously any women, non-binary and trans person.
Okay, so we really thank you, Obiezione Respinta, for the work that you do for monitoring and rising, let's say, actually, I'm happy that the word discourse come up again, because it's all about not only practices, but also creation of mental training. And this is something that I think we really need. I will do like this. I will ask people to intervene if there are any type of questions. I hope so, because we still have time. So I can collect questions, or otherwise, I have 1, 2. Let's start, please. Come here, yes. Or because otherwise, no, we have the mic, we have this, we have this mic if you want.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have kind of a comment and questions because I'm just being an activist myself. I'm very inspired by the work that you do. So my comment and question will be related to your guys' work. So I come from Kosovo, a very small country isolated in Europe. And we have a lot of problems, and that's the reason why we're not part of EU or a candidate. But I feel like we are better off than you guys in some issues. And I kind of told you last night at dinner, because we do have much better access to abortion morning after pill. And of course, there's stigma because we're still a very conservative country, but the access, like if I go to a pharmacy, they will give me a pill for sure if I'm afraid that I might get pregnant. And abortion is more accessible in terms of if you want one, you will find the solution, but it's in a hush way. It is legal, of course, till a certain point, like because there's some medical repercussions that can come with if you out of the first trimester and stuff like that. So, but even in those cases, there are exceptions. Usually it's in the private sphere, not so much in the public sphere, just because there's not enough medical staff and maybe regional hospitals, but it is much better. And also legally, on paper, we have everything legal. So that gives me hope to a certain extent for us, and it discourages me a lot that this is a situation in Italy, because I didn't know that it was this bad. And I have questions for Eleonora and Francesca. For women on web, do you have certain regions or countries that you work more? What about like the poorer countries? How do you outreach? Do you have outreach programs? Do you have coordinators everywhere? What if they don't have a really good postal system? Because that's a problem for my country, that we can get even like from other commodities and without having to go through a hassle. So that is something that I'm thinking of. And also to Francesca, my question was, are you expanding in other countries? Is it just Italy? And do you have volunteers everywhere, like in Italy? So just like more specifics for both of your organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The next question, please. Let's try to have questions, because otherwise it becomes too long and we don't have time to. Other questions? Okay, one? Great.
So thank you for the presentations. I was wondering, did you know anything about, so you mentioned two different presentations that there are a number of abortions are increasing in Italy and maybe also in other countries. So I'm wondering whether you had some knowledge of why this is happening, because people use less contraceptive. The reason why people just decide more often that they don't want children than before, or is because they fear there is less economic stability to raise children? I think this will be useful, I think, or at least interesting to me. Thank you.
Another question, and then I think we might have a brief round of applause.
Thank you very much. This was very insightful, and gave me a lot of ideas, because I'm from Argentina and abortion is legal only since December last year. So we have a lot of ideas to develop social innovations. And we also have the objection of gestión de conciencia. So we also have these problems of doctors refusing, but it's starting now. I wanted to ask, because I don't know, so ignorant myself, if there is any program in Italy or idea or political or policy or whatever, trying also to help women not to spend so much money when they have the menstrual period. So, because this is also like an economic problem and it was not mentioned, so just to know a little bit this. And then if you have an opinion in the sense that, do you also give educational support of sexual support in schools, so more or less this to any one of you.
I think you can look from that.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so maybe we can make a mixed answer, Federica, if you want. The number of abortion in Italy, but I think that it's true in any Western countries, is decreasing. This is a point. So we think that the fact that people is not having children or less children nowadays is not due to the abortion in itself. We think that, as Ipek said at the beginning, we do not have any care system that works for women or for people that have to care for others people. And we have also, something that feels like we do not have the culture of caring in our institution. As an example, I just want to report the words that said Minister San Giuliano just 3 days ago. He said that to help people having children, he will give to any newborn a book. Like if the education can be made with a book, or food can be made with a book. And it's not just this thing. It feels like in Italy, the state, the health institution cares of us in potential, just in potential for having children. So when we say that abortion, for example, is maybe sad, maybe hard to be taken, we are not simply saying about a chosen abortion. We are speaking also about therapeutical abortion. We are speaking also to unwanted abortion, okay? There is no psychological support for women. There is no economic support for women, non-binary and trans people that have an abortion in any sense. So why people is not doing children anymore? I think that one point maybe can be the fact that not being mothers is a way to, as was said before, to not perform care work in some ways, because even if we are not mother, we are daughters, and this is another point. So I simply think that there is a big lack of welfare, of measures that can help a woman having a children. Just to cite another, but among many, many others, the asylum, sorry. There are not asylums for children in Italy. They close at 4 p.m. and people work until 6 p.m. So it's like, I think that it's not they do not know these things. I think that they do not want to do things like this.
Country coverage, let me, because otherwise I'm sure.
So talking about outreach opportunities, no, just to think about what you said, your country and our country. Let's think about USA and what's going on. So let's think of one of the most powerful democratic, countries. And I think that, these three-head dog, neoliberal, capitalistic, and patriarchal dog is like the last step of this. And we see this in USA and we see this in our country. About outreach opportunities and networks, we of course do that. We were the first ones that I think 15 years ago, we did workshops with the group that invented Socorristas en Red. So we always try to connect to social justice movements and collective. Of course, like for African countries, it's more difficult. But we have, for example, just opened a local service in South Africa, and it's going very, very well. About the other question, the one that Francesca already answered, we need to think that I think we do it wrong if we correlate the becoming mothers and deciding not to do it and abortions. I mean, there are 73 millions of abortions each year. 25 millions are unsafe, and people die for unsafe abortions. If I don't want to go on with the pregnancy, I will do it anyway. In Italy, for example, just take an example, abortion we have the lower rate of abortion in all Europe, and it's not because people don't do abortion because they want to become mother. It's because we have too much barriers, and so we go abroad, and so we do unsafe abortion if we are unfortunate, and if we are fortunate, we meet like Obiezione Spinta, Women on Web, and we do outside the healthcare system. I don't think we should, compare motherhood with this essential healthcare operation.
Thank you so much. We have Federica. She wants
Yes, about the number of abortion that put in evidence this situation that probably before was not so evidently, I think that I don't want to put the similar situation, but sometimes working in the anti-violence center, we said, we have a lot of person now that come in the anti-violence center. It's because the violence against women is increasing. No, it's just because before there aren't the possibility to come out these difficulties, this big problem that we have. And also the number are increasing because now we have the possibility to speak about some things and to speak about the other possibility of life that we want and to change also the situation and to reach what we would like to reach and the type of life. So I don't think that we can base on the numbers or statistic, maybe the movement or a society in this kind of field.
Thank you. So thank you so much. I think there are no other comments or questions. I just, before letting Anna to conclude this moment, I just want to clarify, let's say, the sense again of this moment of discussion. I think it was important to have alternative practices, tools, and idea on how to build, let's say, a gender discourse. And I'm pretty sure, I'm quite happy and satisfied of the way in which actually we've seen economic rights, social rights, individual rights, reproductive rights that are under threat, and we have seen way of let's say find alternatives to threats. So I really want to thank all the speakers because I think you have been very talkative and very interactive, and I hope it was useful for everyone. And then 1 second, you have to, it's now. You want to make a question now? So please do it. Do it. Yeah, fast. I thought it was like if there is any other person that has a change of mind.
Thank you. Very, very briefly, I just want to make a bridge with the discussion from yesterday, inspired from what you were saying today. Yesterday, we talked a lot about essential workers, care workers, so focusing a lot on occupations, on workers, but today I'm realizing that probably the literature on care economics is lacking also discussion on essential goods, which should be produced. So in a way, the production side of social reproduction and of care economy, which probably is related also with the investing in care topic we were discussing yesterday, or to a possible powerful industrial policy to say, I want some kind of goods like day after pills, which should be produced by the public and with a fixed price, as we did with the COVID-19 mask in 2 years ago. This is a topic which we have not discussed in these 2 days, but probably in the future should be added to a discussion. Thank you.
This is the peril of the economists that always try to make rights, transform rights in goods, but we are very happy. Thank you, that is very fine. So other comments, or is anyone else want to add, anyone from the organization of Care Economics Conference want to add something? No, everyone is happy. Anna, please, close with the meeting.
Thank you, Marika. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, let me say that also as Dean of the Social Sciences Department, I'm very happy to see that after many years of scientific struggles, this kind of topics, this kind of reflection, feminist theory, care economics are becoming an important part of our scientific community, and I'm very, very happy to see that. The issues related to care services, gender-based violence and migration, you analyzed. Many thanks to the speakers for your very interesting and promising contributions. Also in the concrete perspective of the NGOs activities are very interesting in my specific field, which is political philosophy. And in relation to the topics covered in this roundtable, but also in the seminar series we organized, I will focus on 3 points. And I will start from the analysis of the last book by Nancy Fraser. Nancy Fraser is a feminist scholar who belongs to the critical theory school. The title of the book is Cannibal Capitalism. And in this book, Fraser states that capitalism is an institutionalized social order and not a mere mode of production. And she states that capitalism tends to engulf any differentiation of the different spheres of societies, including the private sphere and the care work. One of the most important activities that is being cannibalized by capitalism is the sphere of social reproduction. The social reproduction sphere includes, as we know very well, activities and energies needed to tend to families, maintain households, sustain communities, nourish friendships, build political networks, and forge solidarities. All these activities are indispensable to society because they replenish human beings, both daily and generationally, while also maintaining social bonds. This kind of activities, as we have analyzed in the seminar series, have been misrecognized or totally neglected, and the consequent care crunch, the care crisis, becomes an acute expression of a social reproductive contradiction internal to capitalism per se. In other words, this crisis is not accidental, but have deep structural roots in the present societal order, as some scholars are suggesting, not just neoliberalism, but capitalism itself must be transformed. Feminist theories have underlined how caring activities are fundamental for the reproduction of social bonds, for the maintenance of society, by stressing at the same time that this kind of activities have historically been misrecognized, denied, and rendered invisible in the political, moral, and economic spheres, also before capitalism. We know that the exclusion of caring activities is determined by the way in which the boundaries, I have in mind, in this case, a reflection by John Tronto, in which the boundaries of political, economic, social, and moral space are conceived. And in so doing, they define a specific social ontology. As a consequence of the demarcation of these spaces, spheres, a social ontology which includes specific women and men identities. The representation of the subject of politics, economics, and morality as rational, autonomous, free, independent, and fully cooperative, a specific version of individualism which characterizes the modern political discourses, is grounded on the relegation of care, bodies, needs, but also emotions and feelings beyond the public space into the dimension of naturalized and pre-political private dimension. We see here a sort of ignorance of this necessity, of this kind of responsibility. And there is also literature which is reflecting exactly in terms of ignorance on these issues, on this point. This situation is also made effective by the contribution, as we know, of political and social institutions, by law and social expectation, which have ensured that men who are active in the public sphere can count on women's care work without questioning this arrangement, which over time has been taken for granted as a privilege that should not be questioned as part of the natural order. The strength of this construction has also included a cognitive dimension, and it is so deep-rooted that it has generated beliefs, mentality, and habitus, as Pierre Bourdieu pointed out, habitus often introjected through symbolic and even epistemic violence, that it is really important to ask ourselves to what extent, and this is my question, it is possible to overcoming it even in a non-capitalist society. In other words, if the misrecognition of care, in some cases stigmatization, is a trans-historical dimension and is internal, and it is internal not only to capitalist society, it is to me not so obvious that to think that it can disappear with capitalist itself. And therefore, we have also to question to what extent socialism is a new category by and large more and more present in the literature of social sciences in the last years, to what extent socialism will be able to transform the trans-historical under-evaluation and segregation of care, which started from the ancient Greek and going on to modernity till contemporary society. So this is my first point that I think we have to put at the center of our future debate. There is another feature of contemporary capitalism that is very consistent with the perspective of cannibal capitalism, I'm suggesting, and it is the category of bio-capitalism and intimate labor, which occurs when capitalism puts life to work. I'm referring here to care work that has become a commodity, and to all the analysis of the commodification of life that invests the body and the forms of intimacy, intimate and affective life. Intimate work is a set of activities that promote the physical, intellectual, affective, and other emotional needs of strangers, friends, family members, sexual partners, children, and the elderly, sick or disabled. This type of work includes not only various forms of care work, domestic work, and sex work, but also a wide range of other forms of paid and unpaid work that do not normally fall under the category of work, such as sperm donation to in vitro fertilization clinics, care of transgender people, and the adoption of foreign children. The wide variety of activities that can be classified as intimate work shows the fluid boundaries between home and work, productive and non-productive work, care and economy, public and private, intimate work, and other forms of work. So we can say that intimate labor is productive labor because it involves the exchange of money, it is situated in the labor market, and so on and so forth. So caring is everywhere in this phase of capitalism. And it exists something that we can call a global economy of intimacy, often gendered and racialized. What is interesting here is that the contribution of the theorists of affective, emotional, and intimate work converge in denouncing the tendency of contemporary capitalism to transform bodies and life itself into commodities and objects of consumption, thus creating new injustice and contradiction on a global scale and of enormous economic significance. An important point of this reflection to me is that it thinks of care as work, and thus in problematizing and rethinking the notion of work based on the relevance of care practices, going beyond the domestic sphere. In this sense, care is a very complex category, a very complex notion, as has been pointed out in many of the seminars we had, and also suggested by the talk in the talk by Ilaria Sant'Anna. My second point is related to the backlash towards the right to abortion and more in general towards the sexual and reproductive rights, as Ipe rightly underlined. In relation to this point, we are assisting to what some scholars have defined in terms of regressive term or cultural backlash, which is at work in many European countries, not only in the US also, but in many European countries called defined by the literature in terms of illiberal democracies, such as Poland, Hungary, Italy, maybe Spain in the future, unfortunately. The same proposal of the traditional conception of the family is also finalized to attack and delegitimize, even by means of specific legislation, homosexuality and the LGBTQI+ community. More recently, within the alt-right political discourse, we see also the mantra of ethnic substitution and nativism as a declination of conspiracy which have a clear anti-migration intention. At the same time, as Ipek underlined, they are celebrating care and motherhood, but as destiny, not as choice, free choice. The World Family Congress in Verona in 2019 is part of an international conservatism action, which include also the activities of the legal codes, the international jurisprudence. One of the examples of this international conservatism convention is the activity of the Agenda Europe, an agenda, a political agenda, not only a theoretical or philosophical assessment. They want to change the legislation in the different countries. And the main document of this international association is titled Restoring the Natural Order. And we can easily understand which goals are embedded in this kind of action. The last point I want to address is related to the category of emancipation. A category, of course, well known because this category is associated to the first wave of feminism. And in this association, this kind of association, emancipation has been negatively interpreted as homologation. And therefore, the women emancipatory movements at that time have been described in terms of mimetic path, mimetic to the male construction of identity, to the male citizenship, and to the male model of participation. I think that emancipation should be stripped from these critical elements, including the self-celebrating framework relative to the modern concept of progress, derived from the Eurocentric perspective of history, by avoiding, at the same time, the colonial and Orientalist traces embedded in this interpretation of emancipation. In so doing, in this work, emancipation should be rightly revisited, should be a category able to encompass a multiple range of social struggles for freedom by helping us to make a critical diagnosis of the contemporary conflicts, interpreted with regards to their specificity, contingency, and unpredictability. So the idea of a linear progress, of the idea of a teleological progress is not embedded in this new version of, should not be included in this new version of emancipation. As the conceptual reverse of domination and subordination, emancipation indicates a process of liberation from domination and oppression in its multiple and intersecting phases. Not a concept related to a precise trajectory within a teleological, again, framework, but rather a negative concept, open to different practices, forms of intersectional agency, and social and political claims related to different contexts, and not shaped on the basis of the unique Western idea of modernization. And in this line of reflection, I think that no Western feminism, I have in mind, for instance, Chandra Mohanty, could be very useful. And in this sense, there is a specific task, I would say, for the feminist theory to engage and to reinforce a dialogue with the Black and Global South feminism. According to Nancy Fraser, I'm concluding, democracy is intrinsically incompatible with structural domination, and therefore the category of emancipation, correctly reshaped, should be put at the center of our thinking on justice and political transformation. Thank you very much.
Really, I mean, I took a lot of notes, Anna, so next year we are plenty of themes that we want to develop in the second series, and I really thank you for your overarching conclusion, and I think you have masterly give proud and let me say give testimony of the effort that we have done in these 6 months. So I think we have been, these 6 months have been quite intense, and I'm pretty sure that everyone has increased his perception and also his way of thinking about feminist theory. We have seen today feminist theory in practice. We want to thank again Ipek, Federica, Eleonora, Francesca, and Anna for their contribution. I want to thank all people that are still here in the room after 2 days of intensive workshop. And I know you're very tired, but you have time to care about yourself now. So enjoy the evening and thank you so much.